Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to Iron Anchor Cycles and back to our sporty chopper project. So hopefully you can tell by what is sitting here in front of me that today's video is going to be about getting into the motor. Now, I've been alluding to what we're going to be doing to this motor and hinting that we've got some big plans for it, and we absolutely do. And this is the video where we're going to get into that. Now, part of what we're doing in this build is sending out the heads to get done, and that's going to take several weeks to do. So what I've decided to do is film the teardown now ahead of time. We'll do a whole bunch of other things, and then we'll come back sort of out of sequence in this video and show you putting it all back together. So we're gonna do the complete or mostly complete build on the motor in this one video, even though we're gonna have to shoot kind of out of order, and I'm gonna have to sit on some of this footage for a little while. Hopefully that's gonna make the best experience for all of you because you'll get to see it all together in one shot rather than having to wait a whole bunch of time like I'm gonna have to for the gratification of watching this go back together. So I guess we should just start getting into it. Now, before I start going to town and tearing this motor down, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what we're gonna be doing. I know I've been alluding to it, but let's talk in detail about what we're gonna be doing. So if you're familiar with Sportster Performance, then you certainly know the name Hammer Performance. As far as I'm concerned, they are the best, or maybe only, but certainly the best Sportster Performance engine shop in the country. I think anyone who's trying to make big power out of a Sportster motor certainly knows the name and maybe has used their stuff. They've got a website that breaks down all the different kits and packages and options they offer, and there's a whole lot of information there. I'm not a dealer for them or affiliated in any way. I just found them a while back and just really like what they offer, and they're really doing something that no one else is doing. So that makes their operation a cool one, I think. So in any event, we are taking this 883 and we are going to be bumping it up to a 1275. We're going to be changing the cams. We're going to be getting head work done, some other kind of tertiary supporting parts as well. We'll get to that as we get to them. But basically, the point of what we're trying to do here is I was trying to get the most power out of this motor that I could in a reasonable way. And based on Hammer Performance's estimations, the kit or kind of combo that we're going with should result in somewhere between 90 and 100 horsepower. Now, of course, I wanted 100 horsepower just like everybody else. You know, that elusive third digit, is definitely something to strive for. However, what Hammer is saying, in order to get to that next step and get over 100 horsepower, it involves replacing the stock CV carburetor and going with something like a Mikuni. And I just didn't want to do that. Obviously, it's no big deal. You can buy a Mikuni carburetor, put it on. I've got some reasons why I didn't want to do that. Namely, this build, I'm trying to keep it simple and clean with as sort of few extraneous looking parts as possible. And I think seeing that Mikuni on there, you would really know something was going on. And I'd really rather that not be visible from the outside. So in addition to that, the other reason I didn't want to change the carburetor out was because, as you all probably know, I'm a fuel injection guy and I am no expert when it comes to tuning carburetors, and Mikunis are complicated. They've got a lot of settings. That's probably why they're able to make more power, because they have a lot more adjustment. But I like the idea for somebody like me who is not a carburetor guy to keep things simple with the CV, that you get it set up and you're good to go. And in truth, that really ties into the first piece of it, which is just keeping things as simple as possible, right? It's a chopper. Don't want extraneous settings and setup and things like that. Really just trying to keep it as bare bones as I can and as simple as I can. And to me, that means running the stock CV carb. Well, obviously, rebuild it and clean it up and do what we got to do, but I'm drawing the line there, which means we're pretty much limited to Hammer's, what they call their 90 plus horsepower kit. So that involves kind of the things that I said. It's a 1275 pistons and cylinders, head work from them, and they've got various tiers of it with various changes they do in terms of, how much boring they do, the compression, different size valves, all that good stuff. They're going to set it up for the correct setup for that particular kit. So designed to work with the cams they recommend. So they're Andrews cams. I believe it's N4, I think. We're also going to be doing an updated ignition so that we can control and tune that in a little bit. So the idea is, with a pretty hot rodded motor, but with some pretty simple setup, hopefully we'll be able to make over 90 horsepower out of a Sportster motor. And I just think that's super cool. So that's kind of the bread and butter of what we're doing. Like I said, we'll get into more of the details. We're obviously gonna have to do an upgraded clutch, some other things, but we'll get into more of that later on down the road. For right now, and my project for this afternoon is I want to get the top end of this bike taken off first, and then probably move over to the cams and get the cam chest taken apart. Got some other little side projects we gotta do as well, but just gonna, I guess, work our way from top to bottom. So I guess without any further ado, let's start cracking this open. So different than a big twin, the rocker plate, if you will, is part of the lower rocker box. So in a big twin, you'd have a lower rocker box and then you have a rocker arm assembly, and they're two different pieces. On this, it's all one piece, so interesting. We'll have to disassemble this to clean it up, and I'm not sure if we're gonna be changing any parts here or not, but for the moment, I'm just gonna put this aside as an assembly. Okay, so before we can remove the heads, just have to take the intake manifold off. So we just got a couple of bolts to undo here. All right, so I've got my service manual here. We just want to make sure we take the head bolts off in the correct sequence. There's just like any other head, there's not just a sequence for going on, but for coming off as well, so you don't warp anything. So let me just take a look here. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. So this might be a little difficult to do with the thing not in the frame. Yeah, I'm gonna need a longer ratchet. Obviously, you've got more room to work when the motor is out of the bike, but these were the bolts I was worried about, getting enough leverage on them, not pulling the whole motor on myself. So let me get a longer ratchet. We'll start with that. So my goal here is to do 1/8 of a turn on each one until they're loose, and then we can just take them out. All right, there's one. Look at these. I don't know, can you see them on the angle, how small these pistons are? If you're used to working on Milwaukee 8s or twin cams, this is pretty funny. All right. Well, that's that. Let's move over here and do our front head. That was actually really easy. I was able to control the turn rate, so it's exactly the same as it would have been if I'd been doing it by hand. The added benefit of not knocking the motor on the ground. Okay. Well, okay. So, you know, it's funny. I actually said that I was going to do a full teardown of the top end, which would obviously mean removing the pistons and the cylinders. However, we don't actually have to send the cylinders out. We're going to get new ones. So does it make sense to just leave this all connected so that we don't get anything down in the crankcase? So that'll at least hold them tight. So if we have to, keep turning the motor over, whatever, we won't be lifting the cylinders off. So I guess that is pretty good for right now. So technically, that's all I really have to do in this moment. I was just trying to get the heads off so we could get them sent out. So they're ready to go. Our next steps are going to be probably taking the cam cover off. I'm going to be doing some work on that. We've got cams to go in. We also have to obviously deal with lifters and all that. But I think just for the sake of ease today, I'm going to stop right here and get the cylinder heads packed up to get shipped out. And then we'll come back with continuing the disassembly, which for me will probably be tomorrow, maybe another day. But for you guys, it's right now. So stick around. All right, well, I got the cylinder heads packed up and out to Hammer Performance to go get the work done. So I'm going to keep tearing down this motor. Like I said, I'm going to leave the pistons and cylinders in for the time being, but I'm going to go ahead and do the lifter covers, lifters, cam cover, cams, get all this stuff stripped off. Maybe we'll work on the primary side too. Not entirely sure, just got to think that through. So in any event, let's continue on. And that doesn't quite clear. All right, I just swapped the battery on the camera, so I took the opportunity to reposition here and make myself a little bit more room. I thought working on this on the bench, on this rolling cart, would be easy, but it actually kind of sucks. If it was up on a higher workbench, it might be nice, or still in the bike would be fine too. This has just been a little awkward. Maybe you've seen that, but in any event, we will persevere. So moving on to the cam covers. So first little detail before we start pulling screws out here is we want to take this bolt out and undo the timing rotor here. So this spins, and this is how your ignition gets the pickup and gets the timing. So obviously if it's spinning, it means it's connected to something that's rotating, and that something is a cam. So if you leave this connected and you pull the cover off, you're going to pull a whole bunch of stuff out with the cover, and you don't want to do that. You want to leave it all in place and have everything stay. You still might lose some stuff because if the cams get stuck in the journals in the cover, you can start pulling stuff out. But we obviously want to make our lives as simple as possible. So we'll undo this and hopefully keep everything in place. All right. So put this aside. And I don't know, we're a little bit zoomed out, but you can actually, you can see what you're looking at here. That's obviously the end of a cam there, an internal part. So just good step to take. But anyway, let's go ahead and undo all these fasteners and see what we got now. So all the cams and everything are trying to come out with the cover. So I'm going to attempt to push it all back in so that everything stays. I'll do my best. All right, got it. Okay. So that worked out pretty well. So obviously here you can see all the bushings in the cover. That's where all of these were riding. So you can tell, you can see how they might want to just slide out because they're just sitting in bushings in the case too. So the goal was to keep everybody in there so we could, see the layout. they come out with the cover, it's really not the end of the world. But anyway, let me go put this down. We'll start to get it cleaned up and we'll come back. Okay, next thing, let's take a look at what we got here for the cams. So if you look here, this is where the rotor screwed in. This was the part we were looking at from the outside of the cam cover. And this is the rear cylinder intake cam. And this actually makes sense why this one has a different spec in terms of free play than the others do, because it's different than the others in that way. I was kind of curious about that, what would make one different than all the others, and makes sense. This one's kind of doing double duty. Not sure how that translates into the free play, but probably explains it. So I'm going to pull each of these out. All right, with that done, we're pretty much finished with the disassembly for now. So I've got some cleaning to do. We got some, grit and grime here on the outside of the motor, and probably, have a little bit more cleaning to do elsewhere. I'm gonna do as much of that as I can now, and then kind of put the motor aside, hopefully all nice and clean. I'm gonna not do anything with the primary now, deal with that probably when the motor is back in the bike. But I just wanna get this ready to go for our new components for when they arrive. So I've got some other things to work on in the interim. One thing is I'm going to be cutting the cam cover down. I've never actually done that before, but I'm sure you've seen it on other bikes or seen it on videos. Obviously the cam cover itself kind of ends in a big square back here and mates up with the big sprocket cover. But obviously if you look at the case, this is really the only amount of cover that you actually need. So all this over here on the cover is all extra. So I'm gonna work on cutting that off and doing a little customization there. So I'm not sure if we're gonna include that in this video or not. I guess you'll just have to see what comes up next. So stick around and we'll either be working on a cam cover or maybe the new parts will be in and we'll be working on the motor next. But for me, it'll be in a couple of days, but for you guys, it's right now. So let's go. All right, well, it's been several weeks, probably more than that, since we shot the first part of this video where we did the teardown on the motor. Since then, we've posted a couple of other videos. Part of that was explaining why the motor is now back in the bike. So if you missed those videos, I'll leave a link up here so you can go check that out. But if you're following along in order, then you know exactly where we are. You will notice, however, though, there's some things different about the bike since the last time we saw it. We've got a sissy bar on here now. We've got a set of handlebars on here now. This is some of the stuff that we were waiting to get done in order to get going with the rest of this. I'm not gonna talk about those parts now. We'll talk about that stuff when we get back into the rest of the build on, we'll call, I guess, the chassis part of the bike. That'll be the next video we do. We're gonna stick to talking about the motor in this video. So what have we been waiting for to get this done other than some of that stuff? Well, I've got a big box from Hammer Performance with our cylinder heads, piston cylinders, all that good stuff ready to go on here, which is what we're gonna start on today. And I also have all of our engine covers all polished up and ready to go on. So I'll actually show you one right now. These all came out super well, but the cam cover is the one that I am just completely stoked about. Obviously, this is the one where we cut the kind of extra metal off of this from the side and down on the bottom and made this essentially just the same shape as what the sealing surface is on the case. So I can slip this on here and sort of show you what this looks like. A little preview, I guess. So that, I'm just completely over the moon about this. The polishing just made it all look perfect. It looks like, it could have been factory this way, honestly. I just think it looks so cool. So I just couldn't help myself but to pull this part out now and show it to you before we get to actually installing it. So I'm pumped to get to getting this put on, but that's not what we're doing first. We've got a whole lot of work to do before we get to installing this. So I think what I'm gonna do right now before we get into the engine parts is I'm just gonna give myself a little bit more room to work here. I'm gonna pull the tank off. I think I'm gonna pull the oil tank off as well. Probably don't need to do that, but I would just like to have as much room both for me to work and also for camera angles to be able to let you guys see what I'm doing. So let me just get these unbolted real quick and then we'll start unboxing our new stuff and we'll see all the cool stuff we have to go on. So stick around. Okay, so I've got the fuel tank and oil tank removed, and I think it's finally time to just pull these cylinders off. If you remember from earlier in the video, I left them on just as a way of, keeping the inside of the case clean. We're not reusing any of this stuff, but figured why have more gaping holes than we need. So I guess now sort of can be our moment of truth to see what we can see in here. Whoop. Our gaskets. It's just so funny how small these Sportster components are. All right, so let's get this out. All right, so there's one. Now, obviously, we're not reusing these pistons or rings, but still like to just follow good practice and protect things. So put a little plastic tube on there. We've definitely got some cleaning to do around the sealing surface here. The base gasket came off with the cylinder. Didn't leave really anything behind here, so that's nice. Less to have to scrape off and perhaps drop inside the motor, so that's good news. Let's do the other one. Okay. Okay. All right. So there's our first look there, and things look reasonably good. I don't see, obviously we've got wear, don't get me wrong. I don't remember what the mileage was on this bike. Honestly, it's been so long, but I don't remember it being super high. If we just look at the wear in here, these look new, honestly. The cross hatching is still all there. I see a little bit of vertical wear, I guess, but certainly nothing I can feel. That might have even just rubbed off with my finger. Yeah, there's no wear in these at all. These are still pretty much 100%. This is also interesting if you're used to big twins with those really narrow spigots on the bottom of the cylinders, and you look at these are like, I don't know, almost a ½ an inch thick. Definitely no risk of cracking one of these off, I wouldn't think. All right, so with that dealt with, I'm gonna get some rags to stick in here. I'm gonna get these base gasket surfaces cleaned off. And then once we've got the bores protected, I'll get the snap rings popped out of each of the pistons and then get the wrist pins pushed out, and we'll remove the pistons. And then once we have the rods free, we'll be able to do a little turning over on the motor and kind of see how things feel there. I don't expect there to be any issues, but I would just like to, just double check and see where we're at. And then once I've got everything stripped off and cleaned up, we will go over and take a look at our new stuff and start to get this installation going. I think we are now good. I kind of took a quick look at the wrist pin bushings here on the connecting rods, and they look good. They haven't spun, so you've got oil holes in the top of the connecting rods, and there's corresponding holes in the bushings. Sometimes what you'll see is that they turn, and then you're obviously not getting any oil to the wrist pin. These are fine in both cases. Extremely minimal wear on each of the bushings as expected. So we're just gonna carry on and keep rolling. So I'm gonna clean up some of this stuff I took off, and without any further ado, we will get the box from Hammer open and see what we got to go on here. All right, so here's our stuff from Hammer. I'll go through all this with you guys. I also have some stuff here that I purchased myself. You could probably also get this stuff from Hammer, some of it anyway. But for me, it was just easier to do some of the stuff on my own. But anyway, let's look at some of the big boxes first. Number one, I just want to point out, you can tell a lot about a company or a manufacturer by how they package things. This is awesome. So all this stuff came packed in like, styrofoam in a bigger box, and then presumably what we've got here is each head packed individually, each cylinder packed individually, and the pistons are actually in here also. I'll show you something. This is just kind of a cool little extra step Hammer does for you that makes things just really simple. And then we've got some gaskets here, and then all the other supplemental little stuff they sealed up in this plastic bag so it doesn't get lost, which I just think that little extra attention to detail is just really nice. So let's start with something fun, which will be getting to look at one of these heads. Let's take a look at these heads because I am expecting to be impressed. Just based on some of the other stuff of theirs I've seen, I think these are going to be really nice. Yeah. All right, this is super cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, they put a lot of work into these. This is definitely not do-it-yourself with a die grinder kind of head work. All right, so there's obviously a lot going on with the work they've done in these heads. I think the most interesting or notable part is the work they do in the combustion chamber in order to get these much, much larger valves to fit in here. So hopefully you can kind of see that, the work they've done here to make that happen, and how far out these valves stick, and what they needed to do to make that happen. So just a really cool thing that they do. And then obviously the ported intake and exhaust chambers. You're not going to be able to see this in great detail, but I'll just try to show you as best as I can. But in any event, really nice. Yeah, these are super cool. So that's one head. Presumably the other one's going to look just the same. Let's pull out one of the piston and cylinders, and I'll show you that. Yeah, pistons are super cool. So here, let me take the plastic off of this. You'll be able to see it a little bit better. All right, so obviously our original heads were worked on and returned to us. The cylinders are not reused. So these are replacement cylinders from them along with new pistons. And we can talk a little bit about the details of these, but what I was pointing out about the extra step they go for you is they actually install the pistons in the cylinders. Now, obviously, this is not a big deal if you know what you're doing. You have a ring compressor, you get your rings on your piston, you set up all the orientation correctly, you make sure your gaps are all good. I normally put the pistons on the motor first and then put the cylinders on. But in this case, we'll do it where we'll drop the piston down and we'll put this all on as one unit. But Hammer goes that extra step for you that they obviously did all your ring gaps for you, and they got all the oiling in here done, lubricated, and it's all set and ready to go. So if you're not as comfortable doing, piston rings and all that, this is about as easy as it gets. And as long as you don't pull this piston out by mistake when you're trying to put it on the motor, all that is taken care of for you. So I think that's really cool. We'll get a better view of this when it goes on the bike, and I can actually, push it up so you'll be able to see it. But take a look at that piston. How cool is that? That is a domed piston, obviously for compression, but then with those huge relief cuts in them for the valves in the heads. So really, really, really cool. And the piston itself, the dome on there, it's going to be a little hard to see hopefully I can show it to you once we get it on the motor, but it's got like a beveled edge to it, which is gonna match up to this angle here. So typically what you would see on like a standard head is this is your squish here, right? So that area would be flat, and it would be flat on the tops of the pistons as well. And when the motor comes up on compression, you have basically air forced laterally across in towards the valves. The way Hammer does it with this angle, and they've got some, you know, science and engineering behind it that is beyond my skill level, but to be able to measure this, but if you can kind of picture it this way up on the motor, you've got these angles here actually pushing that air rather than laterally. It's gonna be up and in towards your valves, which is just super cool, an extra little detail. So matched both on the head and on the piston. So really cool there. All right, so that is the big stuff. The other stuff we've got sitting in this pile, we'll get to it when we get to it, I guess. They include all the gaskets you need, a couple little install tools, but like I said, we'll cover all that when we get to it. The stuff I've got here, we've got a set of Andrews, I believe N4 cams that we're gonna be running on this bike. Yeah, so N4 cams from Andrews. And then I've got replacement head bolts and studs, both from S&S. And then little icing on top, or the cherry on top, a bunch of ARP hardware from fueling to button everything up with and, you know, make this thing just have that one little extra detail. So got a bunch of stuff to do here, and I'm gonna get rolling, and I think we'll do this the same pretty much as we do any other motor and kind of work our way from the bottom up. So we'll start with the cam chest and then just start working our way towards the top, and hopefully we'll have this thing buttoned up today. All right, so I think we're finally ready to start doing this. I've got our new cams laid out here. I just brake cleaned them off to get them cleaned up. The first thing I wanna do before I start installing anything is to check some clearances. Now, I'm not gonna get into all the details here. If you want a full step-by-step walkthrough of how to do this, go check out Hammer Performance's YouTube channel. They're the experts and they've got all the details laid out. But basically a couple things we need to check is clearance of the cams on the lifter bosses and clearance of the number 2 and 3 cams on their race for the pinion bearings. So we don't have super high lift cams, so I wasn't expecting to have any clearance issues, and we don't. But it's basically just a matter of putting each cam in place and making sure that we have the clearance as it spins around. Obviously, if it contacts, then you certainly don't have clearance. But even beyond that, just making sure that you've got some degree of clearance in there, you know, whether it's 20 thousandths to the lifter bosses or whatever, you can find those details in a kit you buy. But we don't have any clearance issues to be worried about. So I checked them all and we're good to go. So the next thing I want to do is we need to do a little bit of disassembly here. So let me grab one more part that I forgot to grab. Okay, so perhaps not a necessary step, but I would certainly consider a highly recommended step, and for that reason I would call it a necessary step, is to replace the oil pump drive gear on the pinion shaft, which is steel in a Sportster, and replace it with this Buell oil pump drive gear, which is bronze. So as I understand it, Buell came out with this bronze version in I think 2006 to replace the steel because in their high horsepower motors, basically they were chewing up these steel ones and causing problems. The bronze one obviously isn't gonna cause those same problems because it's not made of steel, so it'll have a little bit more tolerance to it, and also if it does wear, you've got bronze, not steel, going through your motor. So this is a recommendation by Hammer on all their, anytime they're changing cams, so we're gonna do it. So in order to get that off, we have to take the drive gear off and take this nut off. So obviously this is just like, you know, if you're working on a big twin, if you're trying to take a nut off that's connected to a rotating shaft, you have to have some way of holding it so you can take it off. So Hammer has their own little tool here, which is what we're gonna use. They include that in the kit. Basically meshes in with this gear and bolts onto the case to lock it in place so that we can get this nut off. So The first thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and take this off now. There's our old drive gear. And got our new drive gear to go on. Pretty straightforward. So we've got a key in here. We've got a keyway here. Gonna slide this on. Just get it to mesh with the oil pump. There we go. So there's our oil pump drive gear replaced, pinion gear, nut all back on, torque down, ready to go. So I think we are ready to start getting some cams installed in here. All right, so with that all taken care of, it is time to get these cams installed, and the first step in that is gonna be to lubricate everything with assembly lube. With all that lubricated, go ahead and start putting assembly lube on each of the cams and get them installed. And it doesn't really matter what order they go in, except that number 2 has to be last. So I'm gonna start with number 1. In there. All right, and trying to find the timing mark on it. Maybe I covered up with some lube somehow. All right, well, I got my first cam in here, and you saw me kind of spinning it around looking to try and find the timing mark. And I gotta tell you, this is a new one for me, and this is a first. There's no timing mark on this cam. I'm looking as closely as I can. I thought maybe it was on the teeth. It's supposed to be on the shoulder here, but it's pretty easy to see. There's nothing here. Here, I'll give you guys a better look. So, get the camera to focus, gotta put it in front of my face. There we go. So you look at that, there's nothing there. Stop, focus. All right, so you look all around, nothing. I don't know what to say about that. I guess there's a first time for everything, but I just called Andrews to ask them what the deal is. And of course, and I'm sure they've never seen it before, but like every parts manufacturer will say, we've never seen that before. So I sent them a couple of photos, and hopefully they will send me a replacement for this cam that actually has a timing mark on it, because you definitely need a timing mark. It's not a situation where 3 of them need to be timed and 1 doesn't or something like that. Like, you need a timing mark. So unfortunately, this assembly is gonna get delayed by another week now. You know, they'll, I assume, ship me a cam in short order, but between processing and shipping and everything else, I was really hoping, we have 3 days of rain here in our area, and I was really hoping to make a bunch of progress on this bike, and it seems like we are gonna make no progress on this bike this week, so that's awesome. All right, so while we wait for our replacement number 1 cam to come from Andrews, I'm gonna go out of order here from what I said I was gonna do, because I'm just too impatient to sit and wait. And I'm gonna go ahead and get the top end assembled now. Obviously, I'm not gonna be able to get it entirely assembled because we need the cams in to put the lifters in, and we need the lifters in to put the push rods in. We need the push rods to do the rocker arms, et cetera, et cetera. But at very least, we'll be able to do the pistons and cylinders and heads. So that is what I'm gonna work on now, and we'll at least start to see this thing getting to look like a motor. And frankly, that's actually a more important step for me in some of the other work I have to do, because we still have to figure out how to fab up a bracket for our pipe. And we can't put the pipe on until the heads are on. So once I get the heads on, at least I have something else I can work on if we've got to wait for that cam for a little while. So that's where we're gonna go from here. So I already cleaned up the surfaces here. We did that before. So we're pretty much ready to go to start getting the pistons and cylinders put on. So I'm gonna grab our base gaskets, I'm gonna throw those on, and then we'll start getting the connecting rods and little C-clips in there, and hopefully we don't lose any. Certainly not down the motor, but hopefully not across the shop either when we try to put them in. So I'm gonna work on that, and we'll make some progress here. All right, so I got my base gaskets in place here. I got some ARP moly lube put onto the cylinder studs. Pretty sure I mentioned I had S&S studs to go on here. I decided not to use them. I just didn't like the way they looked. I like the chamfer on these OE ones better. So we're gonna use the OE studs. I think I'm still gonna use the S&S head bolts, but the studs we're gonna leave. So got some assembly lube in the bushings and the connecting rods, and we've got our pre-assembled piston cylinder combo here from Hammer. So I'm gonna attempt to get this connected and get the clips in without popping the piston out of the cylinder. So, like I mentioned, this is not my normal way of doing this, but we'll see, I guess. Well, I got it in, but unfortunately, I screwed it up in that the gap is not in the right spot. So we're gonna have to do it again. All right, cool. There's one. Drop this guy in. So we'll hold that down so it won't come up while we turn the motor over. Maybe I can show you. Yeah, I'll wait till the other one's on. I'll show you the tops of these pistons. They're awesome. All right, so let me get a little reset and we'll do the same thing on the rear. Boom. Seated. All right. Got it? Got it. Getting those C-clips on is always the thing that stresses me out the most about these. So now that we got that done, feeling pretty good. So let me see what I can do to turn this motor over and I can give you a better view of these pistons because they are dope. All right, so there's a view of that front piston. So hopefully you can see what I was talking about. So obviously you've got these mega cutouts for the valves, for the intake and the exhaust. And then in that dome, the shadows are not helping us here for you to be able to see this. Sorry, let me come around to the other side. You can see it better from this side maybe. So you can see how much dome there is sticking out above the top there with this angle here that mates up with the head like I showed you. So we got the same thing going on front and rear. So very cool. All right, let me get ready for the next step and we'll be right back. Okay, so with the cylinders and pistons installed, before I go ahead and get the heads put on, we've got another check to do, which is to check the squish band clearance. So I mentioned the angled squish bands on these pistons that match the heads. I mentioned that a couple of times. What we need to do is check the clearance between that at the top of the piston and the inside of the head. So the spec from Hammer for that is 30 to 40 thousandths. So the way we're gonna do that, and this is their procedure, and just like with everything else I mentioned, you wanna see it in detail, go check out their website or their YouTube channel. But we're basically gonna stick some pieces of solder on here that I've cut into little 1/2-inch pieces, like that. We're gonna kind of glue them on there, not really glue them, but we're just gonna use assembly lube. get them in place, and then we're gonna run the piston up into the head. So we're gonna put the head on, torque it to spec, do that, and then measure those pieces of solder to make sure that we're in that 30 to 40 thousandths range. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but the reason we're measuring it is because if we are over 40 thousandths, we are sacrificing compression and power. If we are under 30 thousandths, we run the risk of contact between the piston and the head as things get hot and expand, et cetera. So obviously, too little is worse than too much, but we don't want either one. We want to be right there in the sweet spot. So we're going to check and make sure that we are. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that and let you watch and follow along. All right, well, I'm not sure where in that process the camera battery died, but it did. And, well, where I stopped was we've got all of our head bolts torqued down. So now what I have to do is a rotation of the motor, just sort of like a quick one fell swoop, and get that piston to just come up, and we should be able to hear those pieces of solder get squished. So wish me the best that I don't go the wrong way or not get it, so here we go. I heard it. Hopefully that worked. So only one way to find out. We'll just loosen these up, same regular sequence, quarter turn at a time until they're loose, and then we'll pull the head off and we'll see what we got. All right, so we pull this off. I'm not sure if the solder will be stuck to the piston or the head, or maybe a little bit of both. Let's see. Well, I've got one piece on the head, so presumably the rest of them should be on the piston, and there they are. So let's rotate this back up, but not lose the cylinder. Pull this head gasket out of the way. Nope. Stay there. All right. So, hoping you can see it, we actually did really well with getting these to squish. Like I said, there's the one from right here is on the head, but the other ones are all right there. It doesn't matter if they land one way or the other. So now all I have to do is find my caliper. We measure all of these, and we want them all to be in that 30 to 40 thousandths range. And if they are, then we're good, and we move on and do the same thing on the rear cylinder. So let me grab that and we'll check it. So make sure we got this zeroed out. And I'm just gonna make a little spot here. So I'm gonna take the first one, actually need another rag. So I'm just gonna wipe the assembly lube off of each one, and we'll take our measurements. Let's see what we got here. First one, 32.5. So that's good. All right, next one in line is the one that's on the head. So let's grab that. $31.5. Next one, 31. Moving across. We've got 33.5. 34. and 32. So we are certainly in spec here, and honestly, we are on the tighter end, which is awesome. So with that range of 30 to 40, I think we were below 35 on all of them, but we were certainly at 31 or above on the low side. So I'm super pumped about that. So basically what we've done, or I should say what Hammer's done, is maximize the absolute amount of compression that we can get out of this setup without getting into dangerous territory in terms of clearances. So that's really perfect. And I'll reiterate something I've said before. This is the sort of tolerances and clearances you will never get from off-the-shelf components. It just does not get this good if you're out buying kits. Not that a kit like this can even be bought off the shelf, but you know, when you're talking about the quality of pistons and cylinders that are done, you know, by a human being and blueprinted, obviously using, you know, CNC equipment, but things that are done by hand versus mass-produced off-the-shelf parts, this is the kind of thing you get when you get something done by hand versus mass production. So, you know, people talk about why do we, you know, we do big twin stuff, why do we use T-man pistons and cylinders instead of like, you know, Revolution or S&S or something like that? It's this type of thing because you get perfection as opposed to erring on the side of abundance of caution because machines are inaccurate and, you know, you don't have to be if you can do it by hand. So hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, all I got to do here is just wipe up this excess assembly lube and we'll do the exact same thing on the rear cylinder. So I won't show you the whole thing again, but maybe I'll turn the camera back on when I go to pop it, and then I'll show you the measurements and we'll see where we're at. So stick around. As promised, rear head is torqued down. Let's give it a squish. Definitely got it that time. Hopefully I hit it hard enough. All right, so back them off, see what we got. All right, see what we got. All right, we got 1 on the head and 5 down in the bore there. All right. All right, time to take some measurements. Start with this one that's on the head. $35, $33, $32, $33, $33, $36. So once again, all really good. I wouldn't ask for any different result if I could, so I'm very happy with that. And with that taken care of, we should be ready to get these heads put on with final torque. So I'm gonna get cleaned up a little bit here and we'll get our heads put on. And then unfortunately, we're, I think, stuck waiting for our new cams. So we'll see what happens next. Well, we're back, and I've got a proper #1 cam now. So if you remember from before, I showed you where that timing mark was missing. So if you look right here, you you should be able hopefully to see on the camera, there's a timing mark on this one. So I wasn't crazy. That cam was missing the timing mark somehow, which is kind of nuts. But in any event, let's pick up where we left off. And I think that was, we were gonna install the number 1 cam, then we were gonna do the 3 and 4, and then number 2, get all these timing marks lined up and hopefully button this up. So let's make it happen. All right. Cool. So there's number 1, timing mark align. And sorry, I realized I was off camera while I was doing the assembly lube, but you get it. Let's do 3. Okay. So for number 4, we've got to align the timing mark on this tooth with the timing mark in between these 2 teeth. All right, boom. All right, so this is a pretty easy one to do. You got nothing to jimmy around, and also it's 1 mark on a tooth, 1 mark in between, so very easy to get it correct. All right, so we got that, those lined up. And now we'll do the number 2. And now this one is where it gets, I don't want to say difficult, but you just got to get everything right. So all at once, you have to get 3 timing marks on here, 1, 2, 3, aligned with the number 1 cam, the mark on the pinion gear, and then also the dot on the number 3 cam. So all that, you know, that's how it all connects together and everything stays timed to the pinion shaft. Aha. All right, so I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to see this, but I can kind of show you what I'm doing here. I got 2 out of 3. So my timing marks are aligned here and here. My timing marks are aligned here and here. And I'm 1 tooth off here. And you can also kind of tell that that's gonna be the case because these timing marks, they're not misaligned, but they rotated out of their, you know, dead on position. So I'm gonna pull this number 2 cam, slide it out. I wanna leave this where it is, leave this where it is, and I wanna rotate this one slightly clockwise. So let's see if we can do that. All right, now, can I get it to go back in? All right, where are we at now? We've got definitely aligned over here. No question about that. We are pretty sure aligned here. This timing marker is just a little hard to see. It's right there, so that's aligned. That one is a little bit harder to visually see. I'm gonna put a straight edge across it. And then over here, we're good as well. So I should probably grab a real straight edge, but if we can use this, we are aligned. So that's on that tooth, pointing right at that. I'm gonna say we're good to go. All our timing marks look good to me. So I just wanna turn the motor over and just make sure everything moves slowly, moves smoothly. And then we'll just put it back where it was and we will call it a day. Perfect. All right, we're back. I'm gonna go a little bit out of order on this, and rather than put the cam cover on now, I'm gonna go ahead and do the lifters and pushrod tubes. Not for any particular reason, but I'm here and I got this stuff ready to go, and I just figured I'd do it that way. So I'm gonna start off by putting some assembly lube into the lifter bores. All right, so with the bores all lubed up, I've got my anti-rotation pins here and cleaned and ready to go. Just gotta pull our lifters out of the juice and get them installed. All right, so got those in. You may have noticed that the rear one kind of looked like it was getting hung up here and it didn't want to fit in the bore. It wasn't actually a lifter to bore issue. It was just that the side of the lifter was touching the cylinder here. So the lifter was touching the cylinder here, so it just didn't want to get straight. I just turned it and it dropped right in, then turned it back to the right orientation. So we're good there. Now just gotta go ahead and put these pins in, torque them down to 60 inch-pounds. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is get the pushrod tubes in place, and I've got a cool little upgrade that I got along with the hammer top end kit, and that is these one-piece pushrod retainers. So this replaces the little teardrops that came on the bike that attach with one bolt and a little roll pin in the back. I already pulled all these roll pins out. They're easy, you just grab them with a vice grip and they just come right out. So what these do is they don't use the pins, and it's obviously one piece for each cylinder. So I think they just look really cool, and they're supposed to function better too. They've got a video on how to put these in. I guess they can be a little bit challenging. They suggested for the seals here that go on the underside that if you want to make it easier, you super glue them in place. So that's what I did. I guess the issue you can have is that these will pop out the bottom as you're trying to get everything put in place, and if you glue them, obviously they're not gonna go anywhere. So I'm gonna go ahead and just try to install these and see how it goes. Pretty simple in terms of, compared to like a big twin, we have all those moving pieces and the retainer and all that. One piece tube, you got an O-ring at the top and then a seal at the bottom, and then you just gotta slide the whole thing in. Maybe easier said than done, but at least the theory is pretty straightforward. So let's see what we can do. Seemed like it worked pretty well. I guess if you hadn't glued the seals, you wouldn't have been able to slide that down the way I just did. But it actually was pretty easy. So let's see if I can get these to bolt down and snug up, and should be good to go. So we got this fully seated down. Our tubes are nicely in the O-rings, and things are looking good. It's sort of weird to me, I don't know, not a Sportster guy, but that the odd angle of these, like the pushrod, the lifters point this way, but the heads point this way. Like they're not exactly lined up, so it's got this sort of angle and this offset to it. I guess that's why you need those kind of funky seals to make it work, but hopefully it does. I don't really know what else to say other than we hope for the best. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing we did here on the front. All right, Tubes are in, retainers are in. They look cool, if nothing else. All right, time to make some progress here and get this cam cover installed. So a couple of things here. I've got our oil fitting reattached here on the outside. I've got a new seal put in for, I guess it's the timing seal, point seal, I guess you want to call it. It's where this number 2 cam sticks through and your timing rotor and pickup connect to. And then I've got some assembly lube on all of the bushings on the inside. So that's pretty much what we need, and I'm just gonna go ahead and grab the gasket and put this in, although I am noticing just a little bit, oops, of oil collected right here. I wanna get rid of that. And right there. All right, looking good. So we will get this gasket put in place and then get the cover slid over. All right, got that in place. I've got a whole bunch of new ARP stainless bolts to use. Whoops. Oh God. I've got some new ARP stainless bolts to use here. I'm not sure which ones go where in terms of length, but we'll just start kind of guessing and finding the right spots. Fortunately, the cams do a good job of holding this in place, so I'm not worried about it falling and having to deal with that. So I've got a bunch of long ones, a few that are a little shorter, and then one short one. So these definitely look like spots for long ones, although maybe not there, I don't know. That looks suspect. That's definitely right. That looks like where our shortest one is gonna go. Wrong. Maybe that's where our short one goes. Yes. What else we got? I guess what I'm trying to do is look for kind of an even stick out, or roughly even stick out on each of these. All right, that feels pretty good. I've got the manual here with the torque sequence, not one I do super often, so I'm just gonna reference this as I snug these down and then torque them. And I'm gonna torque them to, let's say, I mean the spec is I think 80 to 120, so let's do 110 I think for these. All right, so there's our cam cover on, and because we already knocked out the pushrod tubes, we can move up to starting to get the rocker assemblies and rocker box covers put on. So we are moments away from having this motor, for the most part, sealed up. So let's do it. All right, let's go ahead and get this rocker assembly buttoned up. So I've got new push rods from Hammer, a lot stronger than stock, all the usual stuff. These are all marked with their lengths on them, which is nice. So we've got 2 that are 10,750 and 2 that are 10,696. So the 2 shorter ones are gonna be the intake and the 2 longer ones are gonna be the exhaust. So let's go ahead and put these in. Now, I am going to lubricate these, but there's one check I want to do before I do that. Just get that right. 696. Yep. Okay. All right. So with these in place, I guess they call it like a spot check to make sure that your push rods are more or less the correct length. All right, so with the cams now on the base circle and the push rods dropped it to their lowest point, gasket in place, I'm gonna lay the rocker housing on here. All right, and I'm gonna grab the bolts. Okay, so with this in place, the goal here is to have the rockers sit down on the push rods and hold the back side snug against the head. We're just gonna do that by hand. And the idea here is we don't wanna push down on the push rods because you will compress the lifters if we do that. The idea is just to have it snug. And honestly, I don't even need to run these bolts in. This is sitting snug. So the goal here is to check our gap now between what we've got there. So it doesn't really matter if the gasket goes up or down, I wouldn't imagine. But we're gonna stick a caliper in here, get a measurement. All right, so we've got 124 thousandths, and that is pretty close to what we want. Certainly close enough. This is not a very accurate way of measuring this. That's why they call it like a spot check and not a full, I guess a full real check. So your lifters have 200 thousandths of travel in them. So when the cam is on the base circle, you want that push rod sitting so that it puts that plunger in the lifter down halfway through its travel, which is 100 thousandths. And I guess for at least for this measurement, you're sort of looking for plus or minus 50 thousandths of that travel. So we've got 124, so we're at 24 thousandths, a little bit out of spec, if you want to call it that. I'm going to say that's perfectly fine. There's really no adjustment we can make to change that. Really what this would be is if it was way off, like more than 50 thousandths off in one direction or the other, we might have to call Hammer, get some different length push rods or figure something out, but I'm going to call that good. Really no reason to check, in this case, both front and rear cylinders. In most things you do have to check both. In this, all the geometry is the same, so it should be the same. So I'm gonna go ahead and call that good. Like I said, we'll pull this stuff off, we'll do a little lubrication, and we will get these final installed. Oh, one thing I want to point out, and I forgot to, there is some clearancing you might have to do on the rocker assemblies to clear the new bigger valve springs and keepers. In my case, it really didn't look like any clearancing was necessary, but right where that would have been, and that's right in these corners here, the casting was just really rough. And so I just went in and took a die grinder and just smoothed it all out. Gave myself a little bit more clearance, which is never a bad thing, and cleaned up those rough edges. So I did do a little clearancing, although it might not have been necessary. So just figured I'd call that out. Okay, so that is our rocker assembly installed. Now, would be great to just, looks like I knocked the assembly lube off this, maybe with my elbow. It would be great to just be able to move on to the rear cylinder, but we can't do that. We have to wait for these lifters to bleed down. We pumped them up with oil before we installed them, so we've got to wait for the spring pressure to force those lifters to move back down to their home position. One way to do that is to kind of be looking inside and look at the valves and see if they're open or not. That's not a great way of doing it because it's a little hard to tell. Ultimately, you want to be able to spin the push rods by hand. Unfortunately, that is going to be a little difficult to do without having collapsible push rod tubes that you could just get in there and spin. So we're going to give it 30 minutes, which is sort of the minimum time you want to wait. I'll come back over and see if we can make sure that these are back and fully closed and the lifters are fully back open again and not collapsed. So once that's bled down, we'll turn the motor over to top dead center over here and repeat this process on the rear. All right, so I've waited plenty long enough and I was able to get a finger up in here and spin these push rods and get them to move just with one finger. So definitely the lifters have bled down, so we're safe to go ahead and turn the motor over. So I'm gonna do that. All right, and if I haven't mentioned it before, there's 100 different ways to, check where your cylinder is at. The easiest way to kind of, when your cam cover is closed, but your rockers are open, is watch your intake valve open and then close. Then you know you're on the compression stroke, and just, watch the piston come up to top dead center using something down in the spark plug hole, like this little straw. So let's see where we're at here. All right. All right, so that's our exhaust valve opening and then closing. There's our intake valve opening and closing. All right, so now we're on the compression stroke, and I'm going to check that by sticking my finger over the spark plug hole to make sure I feel the piston coming up, and I do. And I'm going to put my little straw in here, and we'll just kind of work this back and forth until I get to the top, which is right there. All right, so we've got our push rods in the right place, ready to go. So I'm just gonna grab the gasket, grab the rocker assembly, all the hardware, and we'll do just like we did on the front, on the rear. All right, well, that's a little problem I wasn't expecting to have, which is not being able to slide the rocker assembly in. There are a couple of options here of how to do this. The easiest option at the moment, I think, is gonna be seeing if I can remove the oil tank and come at it from this side. So obviously, if the bike was hauled together, removing the oil tank would be probably the last thing you'd wanna do. But at the moment right now, it seems like a pretty good option. And it's worth pointing out, obviously the problem we're having here is because of the hardtail. The stock frame will allow you to do this. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this removed and we'll try it again. All right, well, that didn't work either, so let's try something else. All right, here's an idea. What if I take the push rods out? And obviously they need to go back in before this thing gets in place, but maybe I'll have enough room to like kind of spin it around if I can just get it, the back side of it over the valves. Oh, I can't even get that through. Let's try it the other way. All right. Okay. So the housing is in place. Yeah, this is gonna work. Okay. Let's just make sure I got these right. I think this is gonna work. All right. 696 goes here. There's one. And the longer one goes there. Ha, look at that. Boom. In place. So that is not just great news because we can keep going and I don't have to do any other nonsense to get this, but I was just thinking, obviously we're pulling the motor again, so I could just assemble this when it's out of the bike, but the issue is, what if there's a leak or something like that? You're gonna wind up having to pull the motor to change a rocker seal? You don't want that, so looks like there is a way around it. You just kind of have to work it and figure out the trick. And if you noticed, the tops of those push rods were dry. I put some lube up in these just so that I wouldn't make a mess while I was trying to work this thing around. So I think we're good. I'm a little bit concerned about the ability to pull this motor once we, excuse me, once we get the rocker covers on. I might wind up, at least on the rear cylinder, leaving the cover off for now, just so it's easier to get the motor in and out of the frame. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But in any event, now let's fast forward a little bit and let me get this locked down. All right, so that's both our rocker assemblies installed. Obviously, same goes on the rear as the front. We gotta wait until these lifters bleed down so we can turn the motor over again. But what I'm gonna do for the moment anyway is let's go ahead and get this front rocker box buttoned up, and then I'll have to make a decision about whether or not I wanna do the rear. So let's go. All right, so we're in the home stretch. Gonna get these rocker covers put on. On the middle section, these can go either way on either cylinder. You just gotta make sure you put the flapper valve over the breather on the front and the rear, so get it in the right spot. So we'll put this aside for a sec and put a gasket up in here. Just get that to sit down in that groove. Cool. And I'm gonna throw this middle one in now just because we can. All right, let's put that middle section down, right over that gasket. Make sure it doesn't get pinched at all. All right. All right, so with the middle section in place, we're just about ready to put the top cover on. We just wanna make sure and clearance in here if we need to make room for the rocker arms. So higher lift cams, obviously ours aren't super aggressive like I mentioned before. And if you've got, you know, altered rocker ratios, things like that, it might be more of an issue. So what I'm gonna do is, for the moment, I'm gonna just set this all in place, I guess. Let's throw this other gasket in here. And we'll throw the cover on. And that's, yeah, I guess that's right. So, I don't know, I mean, I saw what they did, what Hammer did was like, you know, they said you could sort of put this on here and just hold it in place and, you know, see if you hear any ticking, but I don't know, to me that's not great because these gaskets are gonna compress and we're talking about, you know, differences of thousandths of an inch, and that the compression of those rubber gaskets is definitely gonna make a difference. So, I don't know, I almost wanna put it together dry without the gaskets on, flip it around, at least see where they would hit, see if it even hits that way. If it doesn't hit with no gaskets in it, then we're fine. That might be a good place to start. So I'm just gonna wait. I can't turn the motor over yet. Gotta wait for these to keep bleeding down, but I'll be right back and we'll give that a shot. All right, so I've got this reassembled without the gaskets in there. So let's come around to the other side. Put my hand on here. And we'll see if we get any contact. We should both feel it, see it, and hear it, or maybe one of those three things or all those three things. All right. Well, that is both good news and kind of what I expected. All right, so no contact, which means that with those gaskets in there, there's definitely gonna be even more clearance than there is now. Obviously, they're not gonna sit up, you know, this whole thickness, but there certainly will be a little bit of added clearance by adding those in. So even with heat expansion and, you know, whatever else, I really don't see us having a problem with interference on this particular bike. So we could go the extra step and put some modeling clay in there and let the rocker arms leave an impression of that, and then we could measure from the impression to the rocker top, the rocker box, and see what the clearance actually is and do a little bit of math. But I really don't think we're going to need to do that on this one. So I'm going to say we're good. So at this point, we'll go back to where we were before. I'll get these seals put back in place, and we'll get our 4 bolts put on, and our front cylinder will be done. All right, so there's our front cylinder done. I'm just gonna, I've decided that I am gonna leave this rear rocker box disassembled. It's gonna make it easier to get the motor in and out. I am gonna go ahead and just throw the 2 covers on and just loosely put the hardware in without the gaskets, just so we don't lose anything and I can keep track of all of it, and I can just pull that stuff off when we go to pull the motor out. Motor is coming out very soon, so there's very little that we really needed to do with this all still together before we send everything out for paint and powder coat. But I'll talk about all that later, probably in the next video. But I guess let me just throw these covers on, we'll clean up, and then we'll just recap. But we're pretty much there. All right, well, I think that is gonna be a wrap on the motor build for our sporty project. So pretty much, I guess in this video, it's been over kind of a long period of time for me. We did the full disassembly, we got our stuff back, put the whole motor together, and it's pretty much ready to go. Obviously, we've got a couple last little bolts we got to do here, and we'll do that in an upcoming video after we start final assembly. But I went ahead and threw the sprocket cover and all this assembly back on just so you all could get a better picture of how this is coming out. And I don't know about you guys, but like, I could not be more thrilled with what this is starting to look like. I think this is just gonna be a super cool bike. I don't know if it'll be the coolest Sportster I've ever seen, but like maybe the coolest one I've ever owned. I don't know, I'm stoked. So, like I said, that's it for this video. The next video we do, which I'll be starting, I don't know, hopefully in the next couple of days and getting out to you guys not too long after this one, is dealing with anything else that we have to do that's gonna require welding on the frame. So we've got a couple little things we've got to figure out, probably the biggest of which is getting the new exhaust mounted up, and obviously getting the motor in, or at least the heads on, was critical to do that. So once we get that exhaust bracket fabbed up, we've got a couple other little things like ignition switch and license plate bracket. We'll be pretty much done with the fabrication stuff. And once we get all that done and everything I've got that I can test fitted, we'll take this thing apart, get it all back down to frame, whole pile of parts and a motor, and we'll get the tin sent out for paint, the frame sent out for powder coat, and a couple other little things need to go out to the polisher. But once we do all of that, we'll have another video, and that'll hopefully be final assembly and maybe even starting the thing up. So I hope you guys are enjoying this project. I definitely am, so hope to see you on the next video. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks.